We start this morning, of course, back on the campaign trail with Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump's intensifying efforts to attract undecided voters in battleground states with now just 12 days to go.
Both candidates are stepping up their personal attacks against each other. Yesterday at a Pennsylvania town hall hosted by CNN, Harris called Mr. Trump a fascist. She's echoing the assessment of the former president's one-time chief of staff, John Kelly. He told the New York Times and The Atlantic that Mr. Trump repeatedly suggested he admired dictators and wished he had generals like Adolf Hitler's. Mr. Trump denies he made those comments. The former president was in Georgia yesterday, attending a rally hosted by the conservative group Turning Point Action. Both candidates are warning that the other cannot be trusted to lead.
I do believe that Donald Trump is unstable, increasingly unstable, and unfit to serve.
Do you think Donald Trump is a fascist?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And I also believe that the people who know him best on this subject should be trusted.
Our country is being destroyed and crippled by Kamala Harris, a person that got no votes. Therefore, she's a threat to democracy.
We've got a team standing by to talk about all this and so much more. We start things off with NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba and our senior national politics reporter Jonathan Allen. Good morning to both of you. Monica, let's start with you. So at this town hall, Vice President Harris really seized on these comments by Kelly. Tell us a little more about what she said and just her overall message at yesterday's event.
Yeah, and it came, Joe and Savannah, after she took the step of giving her own statement just specifically on the John Kelly comments from her residence in D.C. before leaving for Pennsylvania for that town hall. And here she continued to dial up some of her warnings about former President Trump, trying to use this and pitch this through the lens of the people who she says knew him best, of the people who were the guardrails when he was in office. Here's a little more of how she tried to make that case.
I think of it as he's just putting out a 911 call to the American people. Understand what could happen if Donald Trump were back in the White House. And this time, we must take very seriously those folks who knew him best.
Her big message here is also the idea that those people like former Trump Chief of Staff John Kelly or some of the others who were around him who've now come out and spoken out against him and are massive critics of Donald Trump won't be there for a second Trump administration. And so she's trying to highlight this idea that the potential for a second Trump term poses, in her words, more danger, and she's going to make that pitch on the Ellipse on Tuesday in this massive closing argument speech, where, again, it's notable location-wise that she's going to be speaking from the very site where Donald Trump spoke on January 6th, just right before the Capitol riot, guys.
John, let's bring you in here and talk about what we're hearing lately from Trump. You have new reporting out this morning that's looking at this tension between the campaign there focusing on policy issues versus Mr. Trump himself, the candidate, going off script and launching these personal attacks on Vice President Kamala Harris. Is that something his campaign is worried about or frustrated by?
Good morning, Savannah. I'm not sure that they're terribly frustrated by it because I think they've anticipated for a long time. They've obviously seen Donald Trump on the world stage here for 10 years. They know that he's not great at sticking exactly to his message. What they are trying to do is keep him consistent with what the basic thrust has been, which is to talk about immigration, talk about inflation, talk about the wars overseas. And they do that because these are the issues that when you look at polls, the voters trust him more on than they trust Harris on. She, of course, has her own set of issues that people trust her on, including abortion and whether she's competent to do the job of president. But these are the ones Trump's folks want to stick to. He does always mention them, but often he trails off into other topics, including the personal invective against Kamala Harris that we've heard lately, and descriptions of the late golfer Arnold Palmer's equipment.
That's a good way to put it right there, John. All right, so Monica, let's look ahead to today. We understand Harris will be campaigning side by side with former President Obama. What can we expect there? How does she plan to use the former president best in these closing days?
Yeah, and really the last couple of weeks were all about trying to build out the persuasion arguments. That's why you saw her with former Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney trying to make this pitch to some Republican or more moderate independent voters. Today, you're going to start to see a newer phase of the closing stretch and that closing argument that we were talking about. And she's going to enlist the party's biggest stars, former President Obama, who she will be with today in Georgia, alongside singer-songwriter Bruce Springsteen, who's going to lend his star power to this event as well. And then on Saturday, the vice president is going to be with former First Lady Michelle Obama. And these events are really meant to be moving into this mode of, okay, it's get out the vote time. It's time to really try to stress to people you have to make a plan to vote, vote early if you can, to try to really boost the turnout. So that's going to be the main message, while she still is going to talk about Donald Trump, and she's going to continue to play clips of him at his rallies, which is a new tool that she's used in the last couple of weeks. So expect that to continue. And then, of course, she's going to head to Texas tomorrow, which is significant because they're not necessarily looking to turn Texas blue, but it's about making this national argument that the vice president will focus on, which is all about reproductive freedom and abortion rights, which is a big part of her closing pitch as well. Joe and Savannah.
John, we're going to talk more about early voting in just a minute, but we did see states like North Carolina and Georgia set records on their first day of early voting. What could that mean for this election, that people really are heading to the polls before November 5th?
Yeah, I wish I could tell you, Savannah. I think after the election, we'll look back and say, oh, we should have known based on the early voting. I mean, what it tells me is that the two parties have done a pretty good job of maximizing the number of people that they can get to turn out early. Of course, the campaigns prefer people to vote early because that means the vote was banked. They're not going to forget to do it on Election Day. And it also means that the target group that the campaigns have to go after time and again, knocking on doors, making phone calls, gets that much smaller in terms of the people who've already voted. But, prognosticating based on early turnout is a tricky business.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.